Hi, I'm Dr. Shawana Davis, a psychotherapist, here to provide a review of Capote versus the Swans, episode 8. And this, of course, is the final episode in the series. This episode was really all about forgiveness. Forgiveness. And it shows up throughout the entire episode. One of the most profound quotes in this episode comes from Capote when he says, "People want both to forgive and to be forgiven." And that was really the overarching theme of this episode. It was about his quest to be forgiven and also about his need to forgive some of his past experiences with his mother. So let me get started. First, we come to know that he is sober, at least attempting to be sober. So, this is the last year of his life, and he is making a last attempt to be sober. And we know with addiction that it is full of relapse and recovery. So, it appears that he is making attempt to recover in this first part of the actual episode. And he is embarking on this course in forgiveness. And so he actually reaches out to Jack at this point, and he actually literally shows up on his doorstep. And so Jack invites him in. He was reluctant, but he does invite Capote in. And so we're able to see them together one last time and see them interact. And they discuss forgiveness in this episode. And at the very end, we see for the very last time, as he is basically asking Jack for forgiveness, that it is forgiven and that they are able to leave on good terms. So that was really nice to watch, to see them actually have that last moment together. Then the rest of this was really all played out basically in Capote's mind. He is still seeking forgiveness from the Swans because of what he did in the past with really betraying them and with his writings by exposing their lives. And so we see him attempting to make amends for that in his last work, Answered Prayers. And so he attempts through the characters in his book to try to make amends for what he had done in his earlier work. And so he goes one by one, right? We see him with CZ and how she is longing to be free. So he's able to provide her with some freedom in this episode, in that particular part of his writing. We see this with Slim. In the writing, he is really seeking her forgiveness. And what she really wants in this episode is really to have some center of attention placed on her and to have a great love. And so he's able to write that for her. Then the other one is Lee. And so in the episode, we see that Lee is in a marriage that is not fulfilling to her. And he actually attempts to make it right with her by fixing that permanently. So he offers his services in that regard with getting rid of her husband. And we see them actually do that together in this episode. It was really touching when we actually get to meet his mother again as he is trying to write answered prayers, and we're able to uncover some of the trauma. We know that just based on some of the prior episodes that really was their dynamic was really delicate, and we knew that there was some trauma that he had experienced in the relationship with her, but we actually see it play out in this episode. We can see it twofold. One, we see it as she is struggling. She's very fragile and she has the son, which is him. And so she basically places some blame for her own misfortune onto little Truman, right, in this episode. And we see him literally trying to knock on the door and really trying to integrate himself into her life. And she says that it's for financial reasons, right? And a whole lot of other things. But we see that he's not able to fully do that. And so we see him really feel the pain of that aloneness in this relationship with his mother and how that plays out. The other part of the traumatic experience is we know that how she came to no longer be alive was a very difficult experience for him, and we see that play out. We see how basically how she dies in this episode, and the real heartbreak that he experiences for that. And it sheds some light on his relationship with Anne and why it was so hard and why he was so hard on her, right? So he had some of this misplaced anger that was likely needed to be directed at this relationship with his mother. It was directed at Anne. And we see that play out in this episode. And actually, Anne actually gives voice to that with how much Anne reminded him of his mother. And so we see that play out in this episode. The other thing that started off a little bit in the beginning was we actually see him when he was attempting to remain sober. We see him actually go to Babe's graveside, right? And we see him actually lay down there. And he actually shares with her that he believes he will be joining her soon. And we knew that just from what we saw in the last episode that he was right. And so we see that he goes there and he lays down. So he's still seeking her forgiveness, even when she's no longer here. And he's attempting to rest um, with her in that episode. The other part of this forgiveness that I think is probably even more difficult for him is the forgiveness of himself. So he struggles with that. And we see him as he ultimately ends up in this episode burning answered prayers, and we see him attempt to write it again at Joanne Carson's house, and we see the pages are all in the water, and he is literally drowning in his unforgiveness of himself and his life, and just his struggle and his battles with himself. And we see that play out on the screen. And ultimately, we see him perish from that inability to forgive himself for his action and what has transpired in his life. So this episode was really really deep to watch, and I think as viewers, it invites all of us to think about that big lesson of forgiveness for our own lives. And it's important to, when possible, to forgive others and also to forgive ourselves as much as possible, because if not, it will literally destroy you. And we see this happen in this episode. Let me know your thoughts. We actually see the dates when all of the other swans actually die as well, and we see that scene where his ashes are actually being auctioned off, right, at $45,000 to some unknown person. So not even the afterworld are these ashes allowed to have some rest. So anyway, let me know your thoughts. I am curious to know what you think about this episode, what weight this notion of forgiveness has on you, and what you thought of it. Thank you for watching.